Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah ta'ala everybody's in good health and iman. So inshallah ta'ala we're going to continue our reading Tafseer of Surah Naziat. So inshallah ta'ala yesterday we got up to the part where Musa alayhi salam, at this time is not a prophet, but he decides to go back to Egypt, and this time he's married, he's got his wife with him. They're traveling through the land and they were trying to find somebody to give them some guidance as to which way to go, etc. And Musa alayhi salam gets his wife to rest on the side of the road, and then he basically sees a light on top of the mountain. So he decides to go there because it may be that there's some people there he can ask and get some help from them. So inshallah ta'ala today's ayat read inshallah ta'ala بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذ ناداه ربه بالوادي المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعصى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فندى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So at this point he's reached the valley of Tuwa and he's reached the mountain specifically which is called Sina or Sinai in English. Now basically this verse 16 says when his Lord called him, which is إِذْ نَادَاهُ رَبُّهُ بِالْوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوَى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this place as Muqaddas, yani sanctified, holy or special. And the reason is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually going to speak to Musa alayhi salam here in this place. And this is where, he will actually converse and get the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is also called Mount Tur, which basically means a green mountain. So this is Tur Sina, which is another common name that you may come across. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of enables him to see some light at the mountain, and that's why he basically is drawn to that light and comes to the mountain to see if there's any people there to help him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that he was going to the mountain to seek help for his wife. And some basic ulama say that this is one of the reasons a person does khidmat, and then the result of that khidmat is that they get some sort of blessing in return of it. So here Musa alayhi salam was obviously taking care of his wife, said to her, sit down, rest, let me go and see if I can find some resources, some people to try and help us in our journey, etc. So he comes to the mountain and then he realizes that actually there's no light there, and in fact there's nobody else there either. So then the ayat describes where his Lord called him. Now so Mufassirin answer the question of what is this call? Because it's obviously a bit ajib, right? That they hear a voice on a mountain, and if it's referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is that? And what does it sound like? So it says here that Musa heard a voice, and the voice said, Musa, you are entering a sacred place, so take off your shoes. Now here you can imagine Musa alayhi salam is very astonished. There's nobody there, yet he's hearing a voice. Now remember, he's not a prophet at this point. Yeah, it's just very important to remember. He's not been given nubuwwat, so he doesn't know these type of things that happen that might be familiar to a prophet. So he takes his shoes off. Now some of the Mufassirin write, why did Musa alayhi salam take his shoes off there then? So one of the opinions is that it's a sign of humility because he's honoring a place that is sacred. And there's another opinion that says that this place is going to become sacred because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to grant Musa alayhi salam nubuwwat here, and there'll be a lot of barakat there, a lot of blessings. And Allah ta'ala wants Musa alayhi salam's skin to touch the bare earth, and that way it will kind of be a source of blessing. So the second question is, what kind of voice did Musa alayhi salam actually hear then? Because obviously we as human beings can't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can't directly interact with Allah ta'ala, face to face type of thing. So how is it that Musa alayhi salam was able to hear the voice? So what the Mufassirin have written is that it's not like the voice that me and you hear. Allah's voice cannot be comprehended like a human voice, and there's no direction to the voice. It was something that was totally all around him, and he wasn't hearing it just through his ears, but they write that he was actually hearing it through his whole body. So it wasn't like what we would call a human voice. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Musa that I am Allah and I am your Rabb, your Lord, and you are going to be made a prophet. So now this is the point at which he's getting his prophecy and he's getting his nubuwah. Now, bear in mind his wife is not with him. She is still where he left her, below the mountain. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him nubuwwat, makes him a prophet. And then in the next ayat, Allah ta'ala actually gives him a job description. So now he's given him the task of being a prophet. Now he's actually going to give him the instruction of what he needs to do. Now he's become a prophet. So the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Idhab ila fir'auna innahu tagha." So Allah ta'ala is saying, go to Fir'aun. Indeed, he has crossed the limit. And then Allah ta'ala says, in verse 18, فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّى. And that say, you will purify yourself. And then Allah ta'ala mentions, وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى. Then it says, and I will guide you towards your Lord so that you fear. Yani you become fearful. Now, the wording used here is tazakka. Now, tazakka is also the word that kind of is derived for zakat. Now, zakat, what does zakat do? Zakat is a means to clean. It is a way of purifying our wealth. That's why we give zakat, because Allah Ta'ala says, give 2.5% of your wealth in charity, because this is a source of purification for your wealth. And tazakka means to purify your own self. So now basically Musa alayhi salam is being sent to be a guide to Fir'aun. And generally speaking, a person can't do their own kind of self-purification. They need someone to guide them along the way. So now here you have a situation where a person is guided towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once a person begins to be guided, he gets that natural awe and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gets that taqwa inside of him. And then he realizes that there is a greater being that I have to answer to. So for a normal person, this would be the situation that once they get the guidance and they start acting upon what they've been told and they develop that taqwa in their heart, etc., they become, generally speaking, more humble and kind of more pious. In the situation of Fir'aun, he had a lot of arrogance. If you remember that he was also quite a zalim, quite an oppressive sort of ruler. He was oppressing the Bani Israel, etc., looking down upon them, seeing them as lower than himself. So the issue then is that when you have a person with such arrogance and such kind of self-love in their heart, telling them to follow somebody else is going to be extremely difficult because their heart just won't accept it. Now, arrogance is a deadly disease, as we know, right? It's a disease that actually can literally kill the heart and create so much darkness in the heart. So if Fir'aun was to try and purify himself, he would be able to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he'd have to get rid of all of his arrogance. And that, for a person who's got a lot of arrogance, they don't generally see themselves as having arrogance, and then to try and tell them to get rid of it is a very big task. So the scholars say that the first step to purifying oneself is basically to remove arrogance. Because if a person always assumes that they're correct and that nobody else's opinion matters and what they say goes, then they're not going to listen to anybody and they're not going to basically heed the advices that are given to them. So this is like step number 1 on the journey of getting your rectification and purification done. So now here Musa alayhi salam knows that I've got to go and speak to this type of person. And he's obviously naturally feeling a little bit scared because he knows the power and arrogance of Fir'aun. But he also knows that he's been given nubuwwat and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told him that he has a job of now going to Fir'aun and fixing this disease that he has in his heart, and to tell him that there is actually somebody or another being that's more powerful than him, and that he isn't actually that powerful as he thinks he is. Now the Mufassirin have written there's something very interesting, a sort of side story here, There was a situation once when Musa alayhi salam was a baby. At that time, Fir'aun had some doubts about Musa alayhi salam as a child. And, obviously he brought him into his house just to kind of please his wife. And one of his ministers came to him and said, let's test this baby. He said, let us present him with a burning coal, a red hot kind of burning hot coal, and let's put some gold on the other side. So there's two choices now for this child to grab one of those two things. So the minister says, if he's a normal child, he will reach out for the coal because it glows and it will be looking attractive to the child. And if he is a gifted child, a gifted baby, then he will not reach for the coal, but rather he'll go for the gold. So Musa alayhi salam, as we know, was gifted. So he actually wouldn't pick the coal, and rather he reached for the gold. So at this point, Jibreel alayhi salam came and forced Musa alayhi salam to pick up the coal. Now, Musa alayhi salam picked up the red hot coal and he actually bit into it. And this actually caused some damage to his tongue. Now, seeing all of this, the Fir'aun became a bit more relaxed, and actually after that incident didn't really suspect anything of Musa alayhi salam after that. But because of this incident, this caused Musa alayhi salam's tongue to become a bit defective, and he had a stammer or was at a speech impediment. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to go to Fir'aun, Musa alayhi salam said, I cannot even speak clearly. So now Musa alayhi salam makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Ya Allah, make my brother Harun a prophet also. Now remember, Harun isn't with him here. He's still back in Egypt. So he's not here in this situation, in this incident. So he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that make him a prophet too, then I'll have some support with me, and we will both do your dhikr and carry out your task. Now there's also a very famous dua that Musa alayhi salam made that's actually recorded in the Quran, which is Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. So this is a dua that kind of says something along the lines of, open the knot of my tongue so I can speak clearly to Fir'aun. So Harun alayhi salam is also now made a prophet, and he gets wahi that you have been made a prophet. So now Harun alayhi salam, as I mentioned, is already in Egypt and gets this revelation that he's now a prophet, and then Musa alayhi salam actually gets his speech cleared up. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants Musa alayhi salam two accepted du'as. And in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in verse 20, فَأَرَاهُ الْآيَةَ الْكُبْرَى. So then he showed him the big sign. Now, this is very interesting. Every prophet was given miracles, which were something that was already prevalent in the society, but this miracle was actually an exceptional form of that thing. So to put that into some context, if you imagine in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, poetry was very, very popular. Yeah, people were known by their poetry and eloquence of language. And when the Prophet ﷺ was given the revelation of the Quran was given in such eloquent Arabic that it actually made the poets speechless. And in fact, some poets would even say things like, this is not the words of a human being. Now, we obviously don't understand the Arabic language, and we can't really relate to what they mean by that. But for somebody who does understand the eloquence and the fasih and baligh kind of manner of the Arabic language will know that the Quran is written in a very particular way. Even the challenge of the time of the Prophet ﷺ was that Allah Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah, that if you have doubts about the Quran, then bring a verse like it. So that challenge was laid out for over 1400 years ago, and to this day, that challenge is still there. Nobody's been able to repeat, mimic or imitate a verse like the Quran. So this is again a miracle in and of itself that we have with our Prophet ﷺ. So that was his miracle. Then if you look at the Isa alayhi salam, in his time, people were very much into medicines and treatments and that kind of thing. And Isa alayhi salam, the miracle that he was given was to bring the ability to bring dead back to life and to cure the blind. So now, if you go back into time and look at Musa alayhi salam's time, in his time, magic and hypnotism was very common. So this type of hypnotism was the kind of magic that was to do with illusions. They would actually have shows and entertainments dealing with illusions. So it wasn't the black magic type of thing, if that makes sense. So the first thing that Musa alayhi salam finds is that excuse me, alhamdulillah, if he puts his hand in his armpit and takes it out, then the arm would shine like a very bright light. So this was one miracle that he was given. And the second miracle that he was given, which isn't mentioned in this ayats that we read, but in other parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that Musa alayhi salam used to have a staff, which he would walk with and he would tend to his sheep, etc. And then basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to him that throw down your staff. And when he threw down the staff, it became a snake. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then basically told him to pick up the staff, the snake, and not to fear from the snake. So when he picked it up, it returned back to its original form. Yani, it was back to a staff. So these were the two kind of miracles that he was given. So when he got to Fir'aun, he showed the hand miracle and then he showed the stick as well. Yani, he was saying that, look, Fir'aun, you're not that big a deal. Yeah, Tika, you might think you're powerful and everything, but you're not really all that. So this is what I can do, and none of your magicians or your ministers can do anything like this. So, you're not that powerful. So then in the next verse, it describes then the situation of Fir'aun. So it says here, فَكَذَّبَ وَعَصَّى. Yeah, so Fir'aun, denied that it was a miracle and he disobeyed. ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. Then he turned back and he struggled. And here what it means is that now that he's shocked by what he sees from Musa alayhi salam about his two miracles, that he wants to actually plan something to combat this and kind of prove that Musa alayhi salam is wrong. So then he tries to struggle in trying to find a way to kind of disprove what Musa alayhi salam had showed him. Then verse 23 says, فَحَشَرَ فَنَدَى, which means basically then he gathered the people and he called. And he was trying to call all his ministers and his magicians, etc. And then he says in verse 24, which is quite a shocking line, he says, فَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. So Fir'aun says, then he said, I am your Lord Most High. So this is the level of arrogance that he had. He said, he went to such a level of arrogance that he actually began to describe himself as God. I am your Lord. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 25, فَأَخَذَهُ اللَّهُ نَكَالُ الْآخِرَةِ وَالْأُولَى. That Allah held him with punishment of the akhirah and the first, meaning dunya. So Allah ta'ala mentions akhirah first because that is the one that can't be avoided. Then in the next ayat, he says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. Which means, indeed in that, the story of Musa is surely a lesson, ibrah, for whoever fears. So if you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a lesson. But if you have an ounce of arrogance and you don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you won't take any lesson from this. Then what happened after that? He called his magicians basically to prove that this is no miracle and anyone can do that. So Fir'aun is now basically trying to disprove the miracles of Musa alayhi salam. So you have to imagine that Fir'aun being the ruler, he had access to a lot of ministers, a lot of people, a lot of specialists, a lot of magicians, etc. So now he's called all of them together and he's basically told them that we need to disprove Musa alayhi salam's miracles. So what he does is he actually arranges a competition between his magicians and Musa alayhi salam. And this is where the staff becomes a snake. And then that staff that becomes a snake actually goes up and swallows up all the magicians' snakes. And then they realize that he is the one on the truth. And then they actually become the followers of Musa alayhi salam. So all the magicians that Fir'aun had now recognize Musa alayhi salam as being truthful. And they actually become the followers of Musa alayhi salam. Now one thing to note is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows examples of his power in three different ways throughout the Quran. One of the questions raised will be how we are created. Then look at your surroundings. Yeah, so this is again about the notion about observing things, reflecting on things, looking at the signs around you, the obvious things like, the sun, how is the sun created, the moon, etc. And then the third way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows things is of mentioning of stories of the past. Yani what happened to this nation, what happened to that nation. So the Quran is littered with various different stories of different prophets. And the reason why they're mentioned again is all to kind of give us insights into things that happened in previous nations, faults that they did, and then the consequences of those faults in a way to actually teach us that, don't repeat these errors, because these are things that they were guided about, they rejected their guidance, and then they were basically punished for their transgressions. So inshallah ta'ala we'll leave it here for today. We'll pick up from verse 27 tomorrow. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant acceptance to our coming together for this dars, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to take benefit of this month of Ramadan. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.